Hey guys, I'm back with another one. So I think I've got this engine pretty much buttoned up for now. I'm gonna put that to the side so I can get started on the transmission. The Squareback's been sitting for about 8 months, I think, since like September, so yeah, just about 8 months. And in that time, the transmission has managed to leak that much. And I'm trying to figure out where exactly it's leaking. I have kind of an idea where it's coming from, so let's go take a look. Here I am underneath the car in the engine bay, and you can see on the transmission there's some oil dripping. There's some here, here, and there. When I bought the Squareback, the previous owner actually gave me a folder full of receipts and maintenance records. And one of those receipts was a rebuilt transmission, which I assume was this one. Here's some examples of the receipts that the previous owner gave me when I bought the Squareback. And it's just a whole bunch of receipts, maintenance records, and everything that was pretty much done to the Squareback. The oldest one I have here is dating from October of 1999. And I know for sure the Squareback was parked in 2009 because they never even bothered putting the registration for 2010, and it's just been garaged since then. This is a transmission warranty that I found in this stack, and this dates March of 2003, and again parked in 2009, so yeah, this is a 6-year-old transmission. So of course I was really happy when I found that receipt, and when I first pulled out this transmission I figured everything's gonna be okay. I just wanted it to look nice and pretty, so I painted everything. I got all new hardware. You can see everything here is all new and cleaned up. So that's the reason why I didn't bother getting a new transmission. I figured this one is pretty much a fresh rebuild and it just needed to be cleaned up a little bit. These are supposed to be studs here with nuts holding on this plate. But down here, I do remember that this hole was actually stripped and the stud was missing. So I was being lazy, and instead of fixing it, I used the bolt here. And back then I just really didn't want to deal with it, and I kind of just crossed my fingers and hoped nothing was gonna leak. And here we are now. Now, as much as I hate it, I'm gonna need to pull out this transmission so I can fix the leaks. But before I do that, I need to take out the transmission fluid, which is here and there. This should be a size 17 Allen. And it's not a 17. Hold on. It's a 14. And it's not a 14 either. What size is that? What the hell? I guess it is a 17. Weird. Man, this transmission fluid is so clean. I probably should have used a much cleaner container, that way I can reuse it, but too late now. I'm gonna just remove the second one here and then let both of them drain out at the same time. Transmission is fully drained and drain plugs are reinstalled. Now while I'm down here, I'm just gonna remove a few things that eventually need to get taken off anyways, like this bolt holding on the shock, the hardware holding the Z-bar, this bracket here for the fuel filter, which is just these two nuts here. The ground strap needs to get removed, along with the clutch cable here. The hardware holding the spring plate to the swing axle, I'm gonna wait until I fully remove the wheel. That way I can notch up here and reinstall it exactly the way it came off. As well as the brake line, I'm gonna remove that with the wheel off. Most of the stuff's pretty much removed and ready to go. Throttle cable is here and out of the way. Clutch cable along with the boat-in tube that it goes through, fuel filter with the bracket, ground strap for the transmission, as well as the two outermost nuts that hold the transmission mount in place. I even removed the two big bolts that hold the transmission bracket, which I probably shouldn't have done yet because after I removed it, the transmission moved down like half an inch and now it's sitting on that boot. So I hope that's gonna be okay. Now I'm working inside the wheel well, and this shouldn't be too bad down here. I've already removed the brake line here as well as the other side. Now I'm going to be working on removing the 3 nuts and bolts holding the spring plate to the swing axle. After I have that removed, I realize I do have to take off the emergency brake line here, which means this drum is going to need to come off. So right now all I have to do is release this latch from this arm and then unhook this bolt and pull this cable out. Do that on the other side and the transmission is ready to go. I'm back under the Squareback, and the absolute last thing that needs to come off is this square bolt here. And this bolt is supposed to hold in the transmission rod thingy over to the rod connected to the shifter inside the cab. But anyways, once that bolt comes off, then this entire thing should just slide right off of the transmission. But while I was down here, I did look down here where it was kind of dripping a little bit of oil. And I think that might be coming from the reverse sensor. So I'm gonna double check the seal there to see if that's where it's kind of leaking from, because the transmission is kind of tilted this way. And I think the oil might just be all the way up here in the front and probably just leaking there. Or maybe it's leaking somewhere here. Who knows? It's kind of just leaking everywhere at this point. So now I'm gonna take that off and should be ready to pull this out. And with the weight supported, I'm gonna pull back. Feels like it's caught on something. I think it's still caught onto the linkage in the front of the transmission. So I'm gonna go inside and kind of just move the shifter around, see if it breaks loose. I shifted all the way down to second or fourth or whatever. As long as I pull it this way, then the rod is gonna go that way, separating it from the transmission. All right, transmission is removed. Remember I said that it may have been leaking right here? Well, look at this. Wow. I guess I never torqued this down, or somehow it came loose. It would probably help if I put a bit of oil Teflon tape, you know, that yellow Teflon. But this probably was like 60% of my leaks. With the transmission out of the car, I can really get a good look at where all the leaks are coming from. Of course, there is a big problem. Here, it's kind of wet, but I think that's just the oil dripping down from here. I don't think it would be coming from this gasket here. I did replace this nose cone gasket a couple years ago, and if it was leaking, I would assume it would be wet in a lot more places than just like an inch right here. So I think that's gonna be okay. These boots, for sure, I'm gonna have to replace. Between the two, this one's a little bit newer. I replaced this about a year and a half ago, whereas this one I put in like 4 years ago. And you can start to see a little bit of cracking right there. And it's even leaking a little bit of oil, so I might as well replace that. The passenger side isn't really too bad. It's kind of oily, but it's more so just dirty. The driver's side though, it's really wet, and I assume that's probably coming from a bad axle seal. I already had plans to remove this tube anyways, and whenever you remove this tube, you have to replace the axle seals. I was able to put the transmission onto the engine stand by myself, which really wasn't too bad. It just makes it a whole lot easier to work on because I can kind of rotate this and orient it the way I want. Now moving on to the drum brakes. And all you really need is a set of vice grips. I mean, there's a lot of tools that you can use out there, but I find it sufficient to use just one set of vice grips. And if you go to the back of where this pin is, you can hold that in place. I'm gonna clamp that, push it in and turn it 90 degrees. And then that will come right off. You can use the same vice grips, just tighten it down. And now I'm going to be removing these springs. Now with all the springs released, you can just take the shoe off. Same thing on this side. This spring you don't really have to take off of the shoe unless you're replacing everything, but this is enough. There goes your cap. Here's some of those wheel seals, which I'll be replacing. And this bearing here, I replaced this about 3 or 4 years ago. I think this is still gonna be okay, so I will not be replacing that. Also, I forgot that there's another washer back here, so that needs to come off. These nuts, I need to take them off so that this plate is free. Then I'll be ready to pull off this tube. And as I was taking off this nut, the stud came off of this one, so I'll need to fix this one as well. I do have to make sure I remember to put 3 gaskets when I put this back together. There's one here, a second one, and then the third one here that's stuck on here. Don't forget to take off this plastic piece right here. Now, as far as this actual axle, I think I'm just gonna leave it in there. I don't need to take it out. My issue is just fixing these holes here and the stripped one on the other side. Driver and passenger side all removed. I'm gonna be cleaning those up in a bit, but this is how the transmission currently stands. I'm not gonna worry about opening this up or anything. I think this transmission is gonna be okay. Here's a better close-up of the passenger side. This is the hole that I believe to be stripped, and you can see if I shove this in without spinning it, it kind of just goes in there. See? It just goes in there like nothing. So there was no way for me to ever torque this nut down, and that's why it was pretty much just leaking here every single time. And this is the insert right here for a M8 by 1.25. All right, I've got my setup here to hold up this axle. That way I have some space to work right there to drill out that hole. This should be good. I'm just gonna check the remaining 5 on this side, and I might as well check the other side because one of them, I think it was this one that came off. I don't know, but the threads looked all right, so I may just need to Loctite it. I ended up just drilling and tapping this hole too on the driver's side. I figured if the stud came off when I was removing that plate, it probably means the thread's not in the best shape, so I just kind of cleaned that up as well. That way I don't have to think about it again. I just spent some time cleaning off this surface here using this flat X-Acto knife. I wanted to make sure there was no more gasket material or RTV. And this other side here looks pretty clean too now. I've been spending some time cleaning up this axle tube right here. You can see it's really shiny compared to this one. And all I've been using is this degreaser along with the toothbrush. I also have a flathead screwdriver to help me kind of clean up some of this gunk here. And this one here is still really dirty, so I gotta work on that one. But this one is really nice and clean, nice and shiny. I noticed this plate here at the bottom is not in the best shape. You can see some of these holes are okay. I scraped off some of the, or all of the gasket material here, and then I discovered this hole is kind of messed up, so I think I'm gonna hammer that flat. So now with everything ready to go, I should be ready to start painting this. This bearing and this inner bearing actually came off of this one, but I don't really need to take them off. This one stay there, so I just masked over them. So I just need to make sure I put those back in place. These are finally done and ready to be installed onto the transmission. When I took this apart, I had 3 gaskets on here. So I'm putting back 3, but I kind of want to double check and make sure it was supposed to be 3. So I put 3 here, and I'm gonna slide the tube back in and torque everything down and just check to see how much play I have on this plate. So I have all 6 of these torqued down with the 3 gaskets in there, and you can kind of see how much play there is in there. Honestly, that's just a little bit too much more than I'm comfortable with, so I think I'm gonna take out one of the gaskets, leaving only 2 in there. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot to put this thing in, so there's always gonna be a lot of play here. So I'm gonna take this out again. I guess maybe try with the 3 gaskets along with this and see how that goes. Putting the 3rd gasket back on. The play on here is very, very minimal. I mean, I guess I could try taking out 1 and then testing it with a 2. I have one of the gaskets removed and the plastic is in there, so I only have 2 gaskets in here, and it actually feels a whole lot better. There's barely any play and it still kind of moves around, so I feel a lot more comfortable running only 2 gaskets on this side. I took a look inside the Haynes and the Bentley manual, and I can't find out whether I need to put any kind of sealant here between the gaskets. In the past I used RTV, but I feel like maybe this time around I should maybe try the Permatex. So I'm gonna do that, just take this apart one more time, put gasket sealer or formula gasket in between both sides of both gaskets. Maybe it wasn't in the manual to put anything here, because maybe I'm not supposed to put anything here. So I might just regret this in the future. But I'm really just hoping that I don't have to open this anytime soon or at all. Okay, first layer is done. Let's hope that's good enough. All right, don't hate me guys, but this is going on. And hopefully for the last time. These 6 nuts are all torqued down. I actually couldn't even find the torque values, so I just tightened it so that it was snug. But basically the seal should now be done. Hopefully it doesn't leak anymore. And same thing as the other side, I put 2 gaskets, but you can see this is really tight. It doesn't even want to move. I think this side is probably gonna need at least 3 or maybe even 4 gaskets. Both axle tubes are now installed, but I'm really glad I bought 6 of those gaskets because the original plan was to put 3 here and 3 here, but it turns out the passenger side really only needed 2 and the driver's side actually needed 4, so it kind of worked out. These are the old sets that I had, driver's side and passenger side, and I've already removed the original seal off of this housing, and it's kind of tricky to get it out. It's a little bit harder than you think, so I had to actually use a punch through here with a hammer, but I finally got that out, and I ran both of these through my ultrasonic cleaner, so they're really nice and clean. Also made sure these holes here are completely free. This is the inner spacer, which is number 11 on the Haynes manual, and this is the outer spacer right there. The outer one seems like it's okay on both sides, except the inner, on one of them, you can see it starting to form a lip there. So I went and bought a brand new set from MP, and it replaces both inners and both outers. So I'm gonna be using these ones. And you have to make sure the chamfer side goes towards the transmission, and it goes in just like that. Now the bearing, this one, you may have to just kind of push it in there or kind of use a mallet or something. I actually have this PVC pipe here, which is 1.25 inches, and I can use a mallet to push that down. Up next is this washer that comes in the new kit, and then a new rubber O-ring, which I've already oiled. And then it's the outer spacer. After that is going to be the whole backing plate. That gasket goes here. This O-ring goes around that bearing. This housing is supposed to hold this washer that comes in the kit and this other seal here. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of oil on the outside diameter. I may need some help with the mallet, or maybe I can do it, or I can actually do it by hand, so it's not too bad. This is the old one. That sounds pretty solid to me. I put a little bit of oil all along the diameter of this, as well as the inner diameter of this seal, because that needs to go through this seal without damaging this metal piece inside that seal. There you go. Wheel axle seal is now installed. These were brand new when I put them on not long ago, so I'm not gonna worry about replacing them. I'm just gonna put them back as is, and it's these springs, pin and keeper. The kit does come with a new cotter pin, but I'm not going to install that yet. I'm going to wait till I can torque this down properly and locking this down. Both the driver and passenger side are now done. Brakes are all installed and everything, so I'm just going to wait until I can torque that nut down, and then I'll be able to put the drum in. Up next I have the axle boots. I am going to be using this, and it feels a lot more higher quality. Even the new hardware too is a lot better looking than the old ones that I had. They actually recommend using this tool here to crimp down these clamps, which I don't have. So I saved these from the old boots, and I'm just going to be reusing them onto these boots. You can see I have this axle lifted up on this table. That way this isn't resting directly on here, which normally isn't the case when you're just driving around. So I have this lifted up, that way I can tighten this in the way that it's gonna be sitting in the car. Obviously you don't want them facing down because all the oil is just gonna leak. What I've done in the past was having it straight up, but the thing is, with this swing axle going up like that, this actually kind of scrunches up a little bit and opens up and can potentially allow dirt to go inside. And I kind of think that may have been the case with me in the past, because when I opened this, there was a bit of dirt in there, and I have no idea how else that would have gotten in there. So some people say either in the 3 o'clock position or the 9 o'clock position, but I also don't want to do that because of the way that this is going to sit on the subframe. You can see a little bit better what I'm talking about with the 3 and the 9 o'clock position. If this boot was sitting like this or like that, it's going to be really difficult for me to service this in the future if I absolutely have to. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have it facing kind of in a diagonal angle like this. So I'm gonna put it kind of at an angle like that. And I put a little bit of oil on the inside diameter of this rubber boot. I technically don't want to tighten this one yet. However, I do want to tighten the inside here because that is gonna stay fixed. Once I have this axle tube installed to the rear shock, that's gonna need to rotate this just a little bit in order for this to sit in the right position. So once that's correct, then I'll be able to tighten this. So I think I'm gonna have this pointing down this way. All right, I have everything put in. I'm gonna tighten everything except this clamp. The transmission is pretty much buttoned up and I have everything all closed out. These boots are now installed and torqued down, minus these last 2 clamps here. Everything else is all done, and then the drums I just need to put back on. But now that that's done, I should be able to start working on the next thing, which is replace the whole harness.